The 24-25 Premier League season delivered more than expected, from underdogs doing what they do best to title contenders slipping away in the latter months of the season, and of course the added VAR drama and chaos to spicing up an already thickening plot to keep us football fans on our toes. With surprises on both ends of the table, it's time to go back to school and hand out some grades, some report cards for each Premier League season this campaign. So from A stars and finishing top of the class, valedictorian if you will, all the way down to the bottom, we're talking about failures, teams that absolutely had a stinker, and for that, we're going to give them an F. We're going to be ranking every single team in the Premier League this season and giving them their grades, so stay tuned to see how your team fared. And as always, go along during the video, commenting down below, do you think my gradings are a bit too harsh, or do you think they're spot on, accurate, and of course, give your own take in the comments below. Welcome to the Miz MB channel, where here we talk about football every single week, from managers that should be sacked, players that should be signed, current form, you name it. Football is what we talk about here. So if this sounds like a bit of you, make sure you hit subscribe to join MB United. This is the team of football lovers and football fanatics, but I've spoken enough about that. Let's get into the grades. So to start off, we are talking about A-star student who finished top of the class, who got 100 out of 100, and this is Liverpool. Now, it's pretty obvious to see why Arne Slot's side finished top of the class. They finished top of the table. They won the Premier League this season. However, it wasn't as straightforward as a lot of people thought it'd be. So before the season, even before a ball was kicked, pundits and fans alike all thought that Liverpool, yes, would finish towards the top end of the table, would finish probably around third, maybe fourth, but I highly doubt anyone saw Liverpool trumping City and trumping Arsenal's efforts in the last two seasons of finishing second. With Arne Slot replacing Jurgen Klopp and only making one signing in the window, it didn't seem like Liverpool were equipped to win the Premier League title, but that's exactly what they did. As Liverpool stormed along to their 20th league title, they only lost 4 games the entire season. Now, Slot's high-intensity build-up from the back play was absolutely vital, and this saw players such as Gravenberch and McAllister absolutely shine. Despite, Salah's all-timer season, those two players in midfield were absolutely vital to Liverpool's system. I don't care what anyone says. Not only that, but they led the table for over 200 days and put together an unbeaten run that lasted 26 games. That's almost 70% of the entire season. Now, despite falling short in Europe and not getting into the latter stages of the Champions League knockouts, this season was absolutely phenomenal from Liverpool. And their flawless campaign under new management was absolutely capped off by the sheer brilliance and fantastic consistency of Mohamed Salah the entire season. Mo Salah topped not only the scoring charts, but also the assist charts for the Premier League and broke countless amounts of records. However, still didn't manage to break Thierry Henry's 20 assist record, so, there's that. But nonetheless, his sheer brilliance this season was an absolute driving force for Liverpool this year. And that is why they finished top of the class. Now, a team that's going to join them towards the top of the class is Newcastle United. Now, not only did Newcastle United secure Champions League football, but this season, despite, ebbing and flowing in and out of form, they were very good this year. Isak and Gordon this year were absolutely sensational for the Magpies. Now, if we're not even just talking about Premier League season alone, the fact that they lifted their first trophy in over 70 years, beating league leaders Liverpool in the Carabao Cup final, that was the cherry on top of the cake. Last year they finished 7th, and this year they've taken it 2 steps better and they finished 5th place, achieving their main goal for this season, which was to make sure that they finished in a Champions League position. Did they achieve their main goal? Yes. Did they get a trophy along the way as well? Yes. And are they going to be playing Champions League football next season, holding on to Isak, Gordon, Guimaraes and all their greatest stars? Yes. For me, that's a simple A. That's a very easy grade A, because not only did they achieve their targets, but then they also got a bit of silverware to carry home with them as well. So for me, Eddie Howe's team, grade A. Now on to the overachievers. These are teams that performed better than most people expected them to and managed to keep a level of consistency throughout the whole season. First up, Chelsea. Now, after consecutive seasons of finishing outside the top 4 and ultimately outside the Champions League positions, Chelsea were almost at a tipping point. You pair that with the numerous amount of young signings put in together in this squad, it wasn't looking like a great formula, and they needed a new coach who was going to be able to take this young squad, galvanize them, and actually make them a fighting unit in the Premier League. Calling Enzo Maresca. Now, despite an open day loss against Manchester City, league holders, they managed to actually put together a very good season run throughout the early months of the season, which saw them not in a title race. Whatever the hell that means. That surge and denial of a title race saw them steadily climb the table in the early months and then drop off in the winter months as well. Now, despite Cole Palmer not being in the greatest of forms from the turn of the year, Chelsea still managed to stabilise the ship and finish 4th. And again, despite Cole Palmer being out of form for about 4 months of the season, he was still the main heartbeat in this Chelsea team. But not only that, we saw another midfielder, someone who is but I think probably as equal as a heartbeat in this Chelsea team, absolutely put in at least 7 out of 10 performances week in, week out, cleaning up the midfield, putting in good passes, linking the defence to the midfield and starting the attacks. I am going to say Caicedo this season has been one of Chelsea's, if not Chelsea's best player this season. Dare I say he's been one of the best midfielders in the Premier League? You guys let me know in the comments below. And in addition to that, they came home with Europa Conference League trophy, beating Real Betis in the final, emphatically as well. So, did Chelsea reach their main goal of getting back into Champions League football? Yes. Did Chelsea win a trophy this season? Yes. And did Chelsea finish in the top 4? Yes. For me, that's another easy grade A. They're still overachieving because a lot of people did think that they wouldn't get back into Champions League football, and they defied all the odds. Even when we saw teams such as Nottingham Forest, Aston Villa, Newcastle start to pick up form whilst Chelsea were a bit on the decline, they still managed to defy the odds, pick themselves back up, brush themselves off, and finish not only 4th place, but then win a trophy as well. So for me, it's a grade A. Next up, Nottingham Forest. If you told me that Nottingham Forest would be 3rd place for most of the season, after just coming off the back of a season where they almost got relegated, I wouldn't believe you. I definitely wouldn't believe you. And you wouldn't believe you either. But that's exactly how this season panned out for Nottingham Forest. Now, going into this season, off the back of a season where they just about avoided relegation, they were looking for mid-table security under new manager, Nuno Espirito Santo. But what Nuno did with this team was take them to Europe. Now, despite them falling away from 3rd and finishing 7th place in the Premier League, this still meant Nottingham Forest qualified for Europe, which is absolutely massive for the club. Not to mention, this was their best ever Premier League finish for 20 years. If you want to talk about more historical records, this season saw Nottingham Forest go on a 6-game winning streak, their longest since 1967. I don't even know if my mum was born yet. Now, that type of form was crucial, and that saw someone like Chris Wood get 20 league goals this year. 20. Chris Wood. Wow. Now again, they did look to be destined to play Champions League football, but then fell away in the last couple games when it really mattered most, and I guess when squad depth would be vital in these types of scenarios. Next season, Nottingham Forest will be playing in the Europa Conference League, and this gives them a real shot at getting some silverware, getting some European silverware to add to their already Champions Leagues in their history, where it adds a bit of flavour, adds a bit of spice, and I guess it adds extra investment for this squad. But who knows, with European football, this allows Nottingham Forest to further invest in the team, and again, if they do find themselves in 3rd place for majority of the season, will they now be able to hold up to it? Will they be able to balance European football and domestic football, as they haven't played European football in over 25 years? Who knows? But for this season, I'm going to give them a grade B. Next up, Brighton. Now, Brighton this season were a bit of a mixed bag, but a good mixed bag. You know, like when you go to the cinema and there's a pick and mix, and there's, you know, it's going to be a mixture of different sweets, but you're going to pick something that you like ultimately. And it's like, you spent a lot of money, yeah, but it's worth it, I guess. Terrible analogy, but I think Brighton this season, as much as they were a mixed bag, were still a good side and still overachieved. Now, after Roberto De Zerbi left to join Marseille, we saw the appointment of 31-year-old Fabian Hürzeler. I'm going to say that one more time. 31-year-old Fabian Hürzeler became the new boss of Brighton after Roberto De Zerbi left to go to Marseille. 31 years of age, this is the youngest manager the Premier League has ever seen. I think this is the youngest manager the world has ever seen. Or at least on this part of the world. I can't tell you about the others. Now, with this appointment and the constant sale of young stars for high fees, Brighton were aiming for some stability in this campaign. And that's exactly what they got. They finished in 8th place with 61 points. Now, previously, in previous years, this would have given you European football, but someone else tipped them to it. I'm going to save that for later. You know who you are. But this team this season showcased not only their quality, but also their resilience. Now, this season, they suffered a humiliating defeat, 7-0 to Nottingham Forest. And if that isn't a humbling, I honestly don't know what is. Now, after Hürzeler's iconic decision to burn his tactic book completely, this saw them actually surge onto good levels of form. And this saw them not only come back and beat Liverpool 3-2, but then also absolutely steamroll Tottenham 4-1. And again, they finished 8th place with 61 points. If not for a certain someone winning the FA Cup, they would have been playing European football. So despite them missing out on European football, this season was a season of adaptation and a season of growth for not only Hürzeler but the Brighton players. And me personally, I think this sets a great foundation for next season for Hürzeler to really solidify his tactics, solidify the players he wants in his team. And I think next year they are a shoo-in for maybe even Europa League football. I think I'm going to be bold and say that from now. But ultimately, grade B. Next up, Bournemouth. Now, with Andoni Iraola at the helm, last season they finished 15th. You know, again, not necessarily in a relegation battle, not necessarily safe in the table, and not necessarily getting that stability in the season. This season, I feel like their main target was to finish in the top 10. I feel like this season, their main target was stability and I guess instilling a level of consistency within the team. Now this season, I feel like their main goal was avoiding a relegation battle and avoiding getting even drawn into, again, finishing 15th place or talking about those positions on the table towards the latter end, 15th, 14th, 13th. They wanted to stay clear of that. And they did more than just steer clear of relegation. They finished in 9th place, a top half finish for Bournemouth, their best ever finish. Now, of course, this was matching their best ever finish under a certain Eddie Howe, but you get the point. Now, despite a late season dip in form and falling out of the domestic cup to none other than Manchester City, a 2-0 win on the final day wrapped up a monumental campaign for Bournemouth. There was nothing but good vibes in the south coast of Bournemouth this season, as we saw star players like Semenyo, Justin Kluivert, Kerkez, Dean Housen put in absolutely sensational performances all season long. And this season saw them do a double over a certain North London team. Was I too happy about that? No. But for Bournemouth, absolutely fantastic. Not to mention a 5-0 thrashing of Nottingham Forest. That just absolutely showcased their attacking ability and their prowess up front. Absolutely frightening. Now, finishing in 9th place, this means that unfortunately Bournemouth did miss out on European football. But for me to even say, unfortunately, Bournemouth missed out on European football, that just shows how good of a season they've had. They showed ambition, they showed style, and definitely quality in the attack. But this season wasn't just quite enough. But it was a good stepping stone for Andoni Iraola, going from 15th place to 9th place. Who knows where they can take it next year? We've already seen their young star Dean Housen leave for 50 million to go and join Real Madrid. If Kluivert leave, who knows? Things are still in motion, and this will kind of pan out how Bournemouth play next season. It's early on in the transfer window, so I'm not going to say too much about how I think they'll do next year, but ultimately for this season, grade B. Next up, Crystal Palace. After mid-table finish last season and great spells of form towards the end of the season as well, Oliver Glasner's side were looking for further stability and making sure that when it comes to the relegation battle, they're not involved. And if they're lucky, a decent cup run. What followed this year was historic. Crystal Palace, the Eagles from South London, secured their first ever major trophy in over 120 years. Can we just get a round of applause in the studio for that? Because that is absolutely sensational. Palace won the FA Cup 1-0, beating Manchester City in Wembley this year, and it was absolutely amazing. And this saw Palace qualify for European football. Because they won the FA Cup, this means they get a spot in next season's Europa League. Now, there's a bit of politics going on right now to see if they actually can play in the Europa League, but I am confident and I hope Palace will actually make it and get through to next season's campaign of Europa League football. Because now that would be absolutely amazing, not only for Crystal Palace, but for the whole of South London. What this would mean for South London as a whole, speaking as a proud South Londoner, unquestionable. However, Palace did finish 12th in the league, which, it's not spectacular. It's not great. They did, I guess, steer clear of a relegation battle. But for the players that he had at their disposal, the great form of Mateta and, of course, the metronome, the maestro, Eberechi Eze, I feel like they could have done better this season. I feel like, personally, Palace could have finished 10th, maybe even in 9th place. But that's just me. That's just my own opinion. In the league, they were kind of inconsistent. And I guess even in the latter stages of the league as well, their form definitely ebbed and flowed, and there was a lot more downs than there were ups. However, we might be able to put this down to distraction and them focusing a lot more on the domestic cups than they did in the league. And of course, with the squad they had, the squad depth, or I should probably even say the lack of squad depth, meant that they weren't able to balance both competitions as well as the Premier League. So maybe I'm being a bit too harsh, but ultimately, grade B. And now we're on to the teams that performed as expected. Nothing exciting, but they still had a decent season, I guess. And where better to start with Aston Villa, finishing in 6th place. Celebrating their 150th year anniversary, Aston Villa and Unai Emery looked to embark on an even better season than last year, which saw them qualify for this campaign of the Champions League. Not only that, but they wanted to make significant impact both in the domestic cups and maybe even push on to the latter stages of the Champions League. Now, they somewhat did that this season. Villa finished 6th place this season on 66 points, and it was tight. The race for the Champions League this season was tight. Unfortunately, they did not make it, missing out on their one main objective this season of making sure they're in the Champions League for the next year, 2 years running. Now, some will say this is controversial, and I personally think that on the final day in their 2-0 loss against Manchester United, VAR had a massive part to play in this. You're asking my opinion on the matter? I think Aston Villa were absolutely robbed. I think what VAR did on that day, they should never do again. Never do again. But we're not talking about VAR's season this year. We're talking about Aston Villa. We might save that for another video. Actually, we might save that for another video. If you guys want to see that, comment it down below. Just comment VAR down below, and yeah, I'll say that's actually a pretty good idea. Now, despite them missing out on Champions League football through the league, this season, they actually had a very good campaign in the Champions League. They reached the quarterfinals where they went on to face PSG, eventual winners of the Champions League, and they got knocked out. And it wasn't like they got steamrolled by PSG. It was actually a very close game in the second leg. The first leg was, yeah, it was over. But the second leg was actually quite close, and Villa almost made it level in the tie, but PSG's quality and experience at this level just showed. However, domestically, if you could paint a picture of how Aston Villa's season went this year, the two key ingredients, a lack of squad depth and inconsistency, would absolutely paint this picture for them. In spite of all of this, they still did finish 6th place, which is a European spot. They're going to the Europa League next season, which I think for Aston Villa is good. I feel like they can still perform, and I feel like this is where they can showcase their quality, maybe without as many games or as much high pressure games as the Champions League. So maybe next year they could potentially push on, win the Europa League and get into the Champions League that way, as well as potentially doing even better in the league next season. For this, I'm giving them a grade B. It's still a decent season for Aston Villa. They didn't meet their main objective. They did get knocked out of all domestic cups, but they're still in Europe. I'd say it's decent. And this is probably like a B-. I'm verging on the precipice of a C. Next up, Brentford. Now, Thomas Frank's side this season were actually pretty good. They were pretty good, but ultimately didn't really push on or didn't really do anything that people didn't expect them to do. Mbeumo and Wissa show their qualities again, scoring both double-digit goals in the league. And, you know, I guess Brentford's quality and squad quality as well showed in certain games. They were inconsistent, dropping in and out of form throughout the year. And I guess this what saw them finish back-to-back 10th place. Again, it's not a terrible season and it's not a fantastic season. I think this is probably how most people expected Brentford's season to go. So for that, grade B. Decent job. Well done, Thomas Frank. Fulham, Everton and Wolves all getting a grade C, but for 3 different reasons. Now, the reason why Wolves are getting a grade C is because me, personally, I feel like this season, Wolves shouldn't have been where they were. Wolves this season under Gary O'Neill were in a relegation battle. In came Vitor Pereira and he absolutely steadied the ship, saved them and had them, I guess, finishing where they probably should finish. Maybe some would say before the season started, they expected them to finish a bit higher. But what Vitor Pereira did was actually pretty good to steady the ship. They had a terrible first half of the season, I'd say probably ranking damn near an F. And then their form in the latter stages of the season was around about a B, almost an A, because they were in fantastic form. And I guess this kind of levels out perfectly to a grade C. I would give this a C+. Everton have been flirting with relegation for so many years now, I've lost count. Honestly, I've lost count. I feel like the sacking of Sean Dyche in February and bringing in David Moyes, me personally, I was actually kind of against it. I thought they'd probably wait till the end of the season and do that. But speaking to some Everton fans, and when I put it online, Everton fans were commenting and saying that no, Sean Dyche had to leave. And I guess they saw it the right way. And I guess they know their club way better than I know Everton. And ultimately, the appointment of David Moyes not only saw an upturn in form for Everton as a whole, but for Beto, key striker for Everton now. Under Sean Dyche, looking a bit lost, was absolutely on a search for goals. And now under David Moyes, the goals are coming to him. Like, he's playing in fantastic form. And I feel like the team itself as a unit are playing well. They finished 13th place this season, which I guess isn't great, isn't bad. From what we've seen over the past couple of years from Everton, it's expected. And hopefully David Moyes can use this as a platform for next season and build on from that. Now, Fulham finishing in 11th place is damn near what you'd expect from Fulham every single season. Now, 11th place for Fulham absolutely sums up what their season was like. We saw flashes of brilliance from Smith Rowe, from Anthony Robinson, from Raul Jimenez as well. Now, it wasn't great, it wasn't fantastic, it wasn't terrible, it was Fulham, which is a very good mid-table side. And I feel like that's exactly what they are in this type of Premier League right now, at least under Marco Silva. He's a very good manager when it comes to stabilizing the ship, you know, using players like Andreas Pereira, Alex Iwobi, and counting on their flair in certain moments, not to mention Harry Wilson, who was putting in super sub performances throughout the entirety of the season. So for me, I'd say C, maybe a C- because they brought in Smith Rowe for a lot of money and he really didn't, you know, sustain his form throughout the entirety of the season, but that might be a bit harsh. Ultimately, a grade C for Fulham is justifiable. And now, on to the underachievers, those who really fell away from the mark. Now, I'm going to start off with my team, Arsenal. And for this, I need no script. Arsenal finished 2nd place again for the 3rd year running. In a season where Manchester City absolutely dropped off, the general consensus was that this was Arsenal's year. And this was not Arsenal's year. Now, despite there being countless amounts of injuries, inconsistency when it came to VAR and the new rule of, oh, if the player kicks the ball away, yellow card, and some other decisions that simply did or did not go our way, you can argue with yourselves in the comments. Arsenal this season were nowhere near what they should have been if they actually wanted to embark on a serious title challenge. Now, yes, I understand. The amount of players that had surgery this year alone, talking of just getting injured, was incredible. Martin Odegaard, Bukayo Saka, Gabriel Magalhaes, Ben White, Julian Timber for a stretch, Kai Havertz, Gabriel Jesus. There's a lot of players, a lot of key players in this Arsenal team that were missing for long stretches of the season. However, even in games where Arsenal drew, they didn't really seem convincing over the stretch of 90 minutes. They might have played great in the spell of 30 minutes or 25 minutes, but for the whole game, some of them they did not deserve to win. And I guess this is why it saw Arsenal draw 14 games this season. That's right, 14 games. That's almost 40% of the games this season that Arsenal played ended up in a draw. Now, despite them embarking on a great campaign in the Champions League, blitzing past Real Madrid, only to fall short against PSG in the semi-finals, PSG who went on to go and win the Champions League, of course, this season was ultimately an underachievement for Arsenal because their main objective this season was win the title, and they didn't. And it's not even like they lost the league in the way they did last year, like by 2 points, just about on the final day. They were out of it for majority of the season. And personally speaking, as an Arsenal fan, that was disappointing. Hugely disappointing. But I guess the fact that Arsenal went on a very good Champions League run, got to the semi-final of the Carabao Cup and, lost back-to-back legs against Newcastle, a C is okay. A C is okay. Another underachiever. Now, from going from winning back-to-back titles, Manchester City were an absolute shadow of themselves this season. Now, some will say it's down to Rodri getting his ACL absolutely blown out against Arsenal early on in the season. And that is, of course, what led to the instability in the midfield, ultimately the instability of the team and dropping out of form. I don't think that's enough for an excuse. I think in the season where Rodri was injured, yes, Kevin De Bruyne is aging and injured. Player of the year last season, Phil Foden, didn't step up. Jack Grealish didn't step up. Doku and Savinho were okay, but ultimately weren't as good as some would like them to be this season for a club like Manchester City. The defense was leaky as ever. And to be fair, to say that for someone like Manchester City is quite shocking. Not only that, but not even making the latter stages of the Champions League this season was an absolute mare. And to put the cherry on top of the cake, losing in the FA Cup final to Crystal Palace, massive underdogs Crystal Palace, I feel like this season has been, I'm very, very close to saying it's a failure for Manchester City, but they still managed to finish in the Champions League spot despite not looking like it for most of the season. They managed to finish third place. And I guess that late resurgence in form, those winter signings in the form of Marmoush, Kusanov, Vitareis, I feel like that is probably what resurrected the team and, carried them to third place and Champions League football next season. Because if Manchester City went in the Champions League next season, that would be a massive, massive failure. But they're in Champions League. So I'm going to give them grade C. Now, West Ham this season were underwhelming. For the quality that they have in the team, I'm talking Jared Bowen, I'm talking Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Paqueta, Kudus, they were disappointing. This season, they definitely set out to build on their recent European success and make sure that at least they have a top half finish and fight for those European spots. Did they do that? No. West Ham this season were nowhere near a top half finish. They absolutely struggled for consistency the entire season, and this saw Julian Lopetegui get sacked halfway through the season. In came in Graham Potter, and there was a breath of fresh air for a couple games, but ultimately the inconsistency prevailed. Now, whilst avoiding relegation, West Ham, to be fair, even just to say avoiding relegation, shows how bad the season was for West Ham, because over the last 2, maybe 3 seasons, actually, no, when they won the Conference League, they were flirting with relegation for a bit. But I guess for the quality of the team and the quality they have on paper, they should be nowhere near a relegation battle. A relegation should not even be in the question for their season. They should comfortably be finishing in the top 10. And they didn't. I mean, despite shock wins against Manchester United and Arsenal, maybe Manchester United isn't a bit of a shock, but trust me, we're getting onto them soon. They weren't great. They really weren't great this season, and I feel like it's a very poor season for West Ham. And next season, they definitely need to build on this and finish at least 10th place. And lastly, underachievers just about. I would say it's a failure, if not for them winning the trophy, the Europa League. But Tottenham this year have been an absolute abysmal. Tottenham won the Europa League against Manchester United, and this saw them qualify for Champions League football. It was a horrible, horrible game to watch as a neutral. Definitely a horrible hate watch as an Arsenal fan. It was a 1-0 narrow win by Tottenham, despite them, I guess, dominating for most of the game. But people online were in agreement to say that this is exactly what 15th and 16th looked like in the Premier League, because it was not a great game. But that's all the positives done. Tottenham this year lost 22 league games. I'm going to say that very clearly into the mic. 22 Premier League games Tottenham lost this season. I actually have no words, because I feel like losing 22 games and finishing 17th, the only 3 teams that were worse than Tottenham in this season were the 3 relegated teams that just came up from the Championship. Wow. It was not a great season. And despite them winning the trophy, you know, most people said online, oh, Tottenham had a better season than Arsenal. They had a better season than this, better season than that. And Postecoglou just got sacked. So I guess he didn't actually have that great of a season. Duh. Now, the only reason they're in the underachievers is because they finished with Europa League trophy, which, you know, it's a European trophy. It's a trophy for someone like Spurs, who aren't really associated with winning trophies like that. Great, it's fantastic. But that's what sees them getting grade E. Because if not for that Europa League final, I would have given them a U. I would have DNF. I would have failed. I might even kick them out of class. But this sets us up perfectly to speak about the absolute failures this season. Now, I already alluded to it before. All 3 teams that came up from the Championship, Leicester, Southampton, and Ipswich Town, were all relegated. So they automatically get Fs. However, the only thing I want to say as a caveat to that is the fact that the Premier League is getting tougher. And I feel like the only team out of those 3 relegated teams that actually seemed to put up a bit of a fight was Ipswich. Ipswich this season, led by Omari Hutchinson, Liam Delap, Leif Davis as well, were actually starting to put up some good form together. I guess not necessarily getting many wins on the board, but when they're playing in the games, you're seeing they're not just getting steamrolled, they're not just getting rolled over. They're actually putting up a good fight and holding some teams potentially. And for that, I gave them a grade E. But Southampton and Leicester are definitely getting grade Fs. I actually think I might change Southampton to a grade U, because they performed woefully. They just about finished on more points than Derby County. Derby County, if you guys didn't know, hold the record for the least amount of Premier League points in a season. In the 38-game season, the least amount. And Southampton almost broke that record. That's how terrible they were this year. But on to the main event, Manchester United. Boy, did they stink. Boy, did they stink this season. Now, from changing manager in November, from Ten Hag to Ruben Amorim, most people just thought this would be a breath of fresh air. But it was a breath of, I don't even know, toxic, I guess. I don't know what it is. It was bad. And whatever's going wrong in Manchester United cannot be solved with just a managerial change. And for a club of Manchester United's stature and size and hit reputation and history, this was an absolute, oh God forgive me, but it was a shit show. Not only did they finish 15th in the league and were no way near European qualification, no way near looking even like a side that has any sort of fight, drive, passion, or even quality about them, but they lost in a European final against Tottenham. They lost in a European final against Tottenham. For a club like Manchester United, that is beyond embarrassing. I'm not even speaking from Arsenal bias. I genuinely, for someone like Manchester United, it is terrible. Like, honestly, it's DEFCON. It's like the worst type of scenario. It's pressing the red button. This is an emergency at Manchester United right now. Like, it wasn't just failure. It was utter collapse. The squad looked disjointed. The atmosphere toxic, and the identity for Manchester United was just non-existent. Like, there's no doubt that Manchester United need a major rebuild in the summer transfer window. At least if they want to be a serious team and not become one of those sleeping, fallen giants. But there you have it. There are the gradings for all of the Premier League teams this season. If you agree with me, make sure you let me know in the comments down below. And if you don't, let me know in the comments down below as well. Smash the like button on this video if you did enjoy it. And if you did enjoy it, please feel free. Tell me why you enjoyed it. Whether you want to comment down below, message me on my socials. It's MidsMB everywhere. And I always reply to all of you guys. Subscribe to join MB United, where we talk about football every single week. And there's going to be some very big changes coming to the channel from start of next season. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. On screen, there's going to be a video popping up right here. I think you're going to enjoy that video just as much. I lied. I think you're going to enjoy that video more than you enjoyed this video. So make sure you watch that. And until my next one, keep it real. And I'll see you when I see you. End of it.